what's happened over the generations is that more of us have woken up to, oh, I don't want to be plugged into the matrix anymore. I don't want to be having to just pay taxes and die just to be here and wait for the weekend before I can feel like I can have any joy and any happiness.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Michael Dumont here on behalf of Be Well Magazine for Talk It Up Tuesday. Today's episode features Jojopahmaria Nsoroma, our publishing partner based in Southern California, who's here to talk about the liberated lifestyle. Listen to today's episode. Make sure you have your notepad and your pencil ready to go so that you can take notes to see what is it going to take for you to live a life where you're in control of the life you experience so you can pursue fulfillment and joy. Take a listen.
This opportunity that you've stepped into is something that we're so ready for at this time on the planet and so needed at this time on the planet. My name is Jojopahmaria Nsoroma, the fiery essence that came out of the water to be a vessel for the divine. I am a shamanic self mastery sage, and I'm also a host here on the Bond to Build platform. You can find me in the Creators Cafe, which I host every Monday from 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific time. And I'm also opening the Nsoroma Home for Higher Community, which is an online spiritual community dedicated to helping people become the best version of themselves by learning how to transform rather than transfer their pain. And like I said, it's such a really important time here on the planet because we've entered into a new age. We really have. And things that were normal for my mother are just no longer working for me and for my generation. So there's been a really big shift, and we're finally at a place to be able to begin to enact and act upon these new thoughts and these new ideas that we are living, that we really need to live. And so the biggest one for me, when I think about in comparison to my mom and to my grandmother, even great grandmother, is what I call the liberated lifestyle. And what is that? Um, because aren't we liberated now? You know, we're not in slavery. Aren't we liberated? Well, the reality is that liberation isn't something that really begins or is based on what happens to you externally. It's really about what's going on for you internally. The word liberation comes from the Latin libre, which essentially means to set free. And it's the opposite of enslaved. And so the liberated lifestyle is really about how we are choosing to experience ourselves in relationship to not just other people, but how we share our gifts, our talents, and our genius in the world. Now, back in the 1800s into the early 1900s, the industrial age had people working in factories, and in that factory system, you really were required to be robotic. Yeah. You were doing maybe one task or maybe two tasks if you were lucky over and over and over and over again. And as things quote unquote progressed, if you weren't in a shoe factory or a paper mill, if you did get into the city and now you're working in an office, you were still kind of packed in to these cubicles, or before cubicles, people were really just in rows and desks. And again, you were expected to be robotic and be the Energizer Bunny. So our world of work and how we've been working has really been kind of an enslavement to the profit and to how production is. And what's happened over the generations is that more of us have woken up to, oh, I don't want to be plugged into the matrix anymore. I don't want to be having to just pay taxes and die just to be here and wait for the weekend before I can feel like I can have any joy and any happiness. And we've also come to a point, I think, in our world and our culture where we want to know more about who we are and what gifts and talents we have, and how we can use that, because when we're using our gifts and our talents, we really feel really good about ourselves. Feel pretty happy about ourselves. And when we support people in using their gifts and their talents, that also is another way that we feel good, we feel happy. And just even that, even knowing that we have the right to really every day feel happy, to feel fulfilled in life, it's something different than what my mother and my grandmother were going through. And so this pursuit of happiness, this need to be set free from working like a robot, to be set free from limitations on how much money you can earn, to be set free from, I can't be a musician because I can't make enough money, or I can't take care of myself, whatever the excuse would be. That's all really changing. When COVID came, we saw a huge, huge shift in people's experience and relationship to the world of work. Because for the first time, thanks to Zoom and other online applications, people were able to work from home. And in that process, we also see the great resignation, where again, people tired of being up in an office and, in that robotic lifestyle, decided to just leave and to open up to sharing their gifts and their talents in a different way, in a new way. And so, this notion of liberated lifestyle is something that is truly a gift that we're moving into. Um, and it is a global thing, it's happening on a global level. And so to have a platform that can support us in that is, to me, really, really, really wonderful. For myself personally, I began to liberate myself from working in a way that was no longer working for me, which was working for other people, working in other people's environments that weren't conducive to all of what I was becoming and how I was growing and becoming more into my emotional and spiritual intelligence. And so I began to really say, okay, let me learn what being liberated in my lifestyle really means. And so I went total nomad, because I wanted to really cut loose from the restraints of, I got to pay rent and I've got to pay my gas bill, and I've got to do all of these things. And I chose to allow myself to, before Airbnb became a thing, kind of do that with friends and friends of friends. And so I would take up residence for short periods in people's homes in different parts of the country, and just begin to learn about who I was, and what is it I really wanted to do and how did I want to do it. And in that process of 7 years, it was about, I was able to integrate my gifts, my talents that were calling to me, and was able to offer them to an organization in a way that I never thought was possible, but it became possible. And so I got liberated from working under, in a box or based on somebody else's understanding or misunderstandings, let me say that. And I was able to create something new in the field of human services that is still doing very well today. So getting liberated, let me talk to you about like what blocks us to the liberated lifestyle. And as you heard in my story, the first thing, it's about fear. It's fear. And that's being bound to the past. When we're bound to our past, when we think that the only way that we can achieve success, have enough income, um, do the right thing, is has to be based upon what our parents did or grandparents did. That's going to block you from your liberated lifestyle, because the reality is that it was a whole different world, 50, 100 years ago. And today, because of technology mainly, we don't have to be bound even to an office in order to share our gifts and our talents. Another block is being restrained from your truth. Our school system is set up to prepare people for the industries, the businesses, and the other services that are needed. Um, but it may not be something that everybody wants to participate in. For example, not everybody wants to be a doctor. Not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody wants to be a lawyer. Um, and so we have, unfortunately, not really given children an opportunity to really develop what it is they are loving to do. We focus on how much money can you make rather than how happy can you be. And so for most of us, we have been restrained from our truth just through our school system, our school experience. And when we're restrained from our truth, we can't be free, because the third constraint, the third block to liberated living is this confinement to somebody else's reality, confinement to what somebody else believes is right for you. And it may not be right for you at all. So, just again, blocks to liberated living, one would be you're bound to the past, and that's operating out of the fear. You're restrained from your truth. You haven't given yourself enough time to say, you know what, I really like doing this in this way. That really works for me. That's what I want to do. And then being confined to someone else's reality, living up to what somebody else thinks is what you need to do in order to be successful. Yeah. And, moving through those blocks is not easy, because usually this stuff is coming from family, or people who, you may admire, and people who have been mentors, maybe coaches to you. So it's very hard to say no to people that, care about you. But when you have your dreams, when you have what it is that you want to do, um, you're not gonna be happy until you give yourself permission to act on that. Yeah. And the people who really love you will support you in that. That's been my experience for sure. So let me talk about the supports for the liberated lifestyle. Like, what did I have to do over those 7 years as I was being a nomad, as I was opening up to learning, like, can somebody who is a shamanic healer really make enough money to have their own living space, or will I need to be living with people for the rest of my life? Can I have a car? Can I have vacations? Can I travel to more places I want to go to? Those kinds of things. And so, what I learned, the big, big, big support that was required for me to free myself up, to get free from being enslaved to, the old ways of doing and being in life, is I had to learn to love myself. Self-love, it's essential. And, when you're first told that, you really don't love yourself, you say, but that's not true. I wake up in the morning and I put on my clothes and I make sure my hair is good and put a little lipstick, and, and I'm kind to people. What do you mean I don't love myself? But self love is more about, again, back to those blocks to liberation. You know, how are you still living out of the past? Because if you're doing that, you're not loving yourself. How are you confining yourself to somebody else's reality? Because if you're doing that, you're not loving yourself. So, loving ourselves really is about giving ourselves permission to know and be all of who it is that we really are, and to give ourselves permission to do what works for us, and to set boundaries so that we don't, put ourselves into a position where we're feeling obligated to somebody else's truth or somebody else's reality. And so loving ourselves, it takes courage. It really does. And it's not about needing somebody else to tell you that what you're doing is right. You have to tell yourself that what you're doing is right. That's the first thing. Next is self worthiness. Yes. So once you become conscious, I got to work on loving myself, doing what it is that really works for me. Then I have to believe that I'm worthy. I'm worthy of all that I can receive by sharing my gifts, my talents, and my genius in a way that works for me. That worthiness piece is really something that sometimes we will overlook, but it will show up when you're feeling like things aren't working out, when you're feeling like you can't or you won't, when you start to fall into a despair. um, that means you're lacking in your self-worthiness muscle, because self-worthiness is really choosing to believe that you can have your dreams come true, that you can have your happy endings. Absolutely. And again, it's work, just like self-love. And the worthiness piece is when, I'm settling for what doesn't really work for me, thinking that, well, that's the best that I can do. That's not self-worthiness. The self-worthiness is where I'm in a situation that's not working. I know it's not working, and I start to manifest what will work by saying, this isn't it, but I'm open to learning what more there can be. Yeah. And then last but not least, it's self-mastery. And self-mastery is where I'm loving myself enough, I feel worthy enough to go on a journey on a daily basis to become totally in charge of who and what I am and how my life is experienced. Yeah. I actually call it the goal of self mastery is personal sovereignty, where I rule, I get to rule. As children and even as adolescents, we don't have sovereignty. We are reliant upon other people and things in order to survive and to have our basic needs met. But once we become an adult, once we grow up, we really can begin to have the experience of personal sovereignty. Self mastery means that I take full responsibility for what I'm thinking, saying, doing, believing, and that all that can show up is what I'm believing about myself. So if I'm in a situation that's not working, that means that there's something inside of me that's not loving me, that doesn't feel worthy. And I've got to take on my self mastery task to shift that up. So self mastery is a real process of identifying the blocks and opening up to receiving support to have those blocks dissolved, to have them moved. And it's a journey. It's a journey. And it's a journey that I help to guide people on as I continue to do my self mastery work so that I continue to have my happy endings and stay fulfilled in life. So I hope that this bit of information about the liberated lifestyle is of service to you. I do believe that you have stepped into a wonderful, wonderful community and environment that can support you in really claiming your liberated lifestyle, identifying the blocks, how are they showing up for you, and also getting support to remove those blocks so that you can really, really, on a daily basis, feel good about yourself, feel good about what you're doing, and believe that you can have your dreams come true. Thanks for listening.